Hey YouTube, Kira Qualia here, bringing you all my future card, Buddyfight, Jackknife Dragon World deck profile for post the 10th anniversary future card Buddyfight set. We got some new revival items and spells for the Jackknife Dragon World deck in the form of Gold Riter revival item. I've been wanting to make the Jackknife Dragon World deck for a good while and finally got around to it. And when I say a while, I mean I've been working on this since Buddyfight ended and just never got around to actually collecting up all the cards I wanted for the Jackknife Dragon World deck. But was finally able to, pluck up the courage to finally just get everything for the deck that I needed. And with the added new cards from the 10th anniversary set, it makes for a really, really fun deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. We'll go ahead and start off with our flag and our buddy, which is Jackknife Dragon Revival Buddy. The initial playstyle with the deck is to set up your go-to item, which is Jackknife Gold Riter Revival item, having additional setup with cards like Jackknife Trust, being able to use 2 items on ourself as our go-to dragon weapon. So along with our buddy being Jackknife Dragon Revival Buddy, we're also running 4 additional copies of this monster, with this card's call cost being pay 1 gauge and put the top card of your deck into its soul. If you have an item with 6,000 or greater power equipped, this card's size on the field is reduced by 2, making it a size 0 monster. So you can have other Jackknife monsters on the field as well. And then also counter blade termination of bonds during your turn. You may pay 1 gauge. If you do, your life becomes 5. Put up to 2 cards with different names and with Jackknife in their card names from your deck into your hand. Shuffle your deck. Then you may equip up to 1 Jackknife Gold Riter from your hand without paying its equip cost. You may only use blade termination of bonds once. So this is the initial setup to go into your main new item, which is the Jackknife Gold Riter Revival item. It is also regarded as Gold Riter, so you can search and use it with Jackknife Dragon Revival Buddy. So very, very useful for that setup. And then you also just have a monster with double attack and soul guard, 3 critical, and a size 0 to not conflict with any of the other Jackknife monsters that we also run in the deck. So 3 copies of Jackknife Gold Krieger. For backup, you put this card on top of a monster on your field and pay 1 gauge. If you have an item with 6,000 or greater power equipped, this card's size on the field is reduced by 2. Once again, another size reduction. And when this card enters the field, you may drop a hand card. If you do, put up to 1 Jackknife Gold Riter from your deck into your hand and shuffle your deck. It's just an additional monster option to run for additional play with some of our other Jackknife monsters, including our Jackknife Neo Gold Riter, which all these monsters just help to set up the Gold Riter item. You pay 2 gauge, put this card on top of a monster with Jackknife and its card name. If there are 3 or more soul in this card, you may pay 2 gauge. If you do, put this card to the drop and equip 1 Jackknife Gold Riter from your hand without paying its equip cost. But once again, just search power, and the same goes for our last monster that we run in the deck, which is the original Jackknife Dragon. Just need to pay 1 gauge. You may pay 2 gauge. If you do, search your deck for a monster with Jackknife and its card name, call it on top of this card, and shuffle your deck. So just being able to grab our Revival Buddy off of our initial Jackknife just adds an additional searcher in the deck for us to be able to grab Jackknife Dragon. Also, all the monsters in this deck are meant to just search and set up our go-to revival item, which is Jackknife Gold Riter Revival item. It's regarded as Gold Riter. Its equip cost is when you have 5 life or less, which can be set up with our initial Jackknife Dragon as well, since we can just play this card. And then also you put a monster with 2 or more soul from your field into your drop zone, pay 2 gauge. But once again, Jackknife Revival Buddy will get around this cost since you just activate without paying the call cost or the equip cost. And this card cannot be destroyed nor returned to your hand. You cannot take damage by your opponent's card effects. If you have a monster with Jackknife and its card name on your field, all cards with Jackknife and its card name on your field cannot be destroyed nor leave the field by your opponent's cards. So this is also your Jackknife Gold Riter, since it is an item on your field. And also with this card, damage dealt to you from link attacks becomes 2 instead. So if your opponent tries to hit over the 15k defense of Gold Riter, any damage you will take will be 2, making it all the easier to reduce that damage. And then this item also having 4 You critical 15,000 power with double attack and penetrate as well. The additional item that we run with Jackknife Trust is our Future Sword Jackknife Granthensys. This card can also be treated as Gold Riter. Its release condition is if you have 5 life or less and you have Gold Riter on your Star Dragon World item with Dragon Force and its card name equipped. So this card on the field cannot be destroyed or returned to the hand for the option of your abilities to be nullified, and damage you take is reduced by 2, making it an impenetrable wall for the fact that you'll take 2 damage off of Gold Riter Eye, and then with your Granthensys equipped, you also have the reduction. So you will be basically taking no damage, having an additional item, basic weapon on your field to also be able to use for the initial attack of 2 damage, and also having quadruple attack on top of that as well, being able to then just equip this item for that option for the release condition of needing your 5 life or less, and you have Jackknife Gold Riter on your item equipped as well. So very, very useful and powerful. But the main setup to get this card is to use our Jackknife Trust, which we also run 4 copies of just to see this card as well. With the set play, this card remains on the field. You may pay 1 life. If you do, put a monster with Jackknife and its card name or deck or drop into your hand. If you looked into your deck directly, you may shuffle it. You will lose this ability once per turn. All cards with Jackknife on your field cannot be rest, and their abilities cannot be nullified, and their soul cannot be dropped by your opponent's card effects. And you may equip an additional item with Jackknife and its card name. You may only set 1 Jackknife Trust on your field. So this is the double item equip that I was speaking of, being able to equip both your Granthensys and your revival item onto yourself as your 2 Jackknives that we'll use. So just being able to have these items equipped gives you almost an impenetrable wall for your opponent to go up against with you, thanks to this set card on the field. We're also running the 4 copies of Jackknife Statue. You may only cast this card if you have a card with Jackknife and its card name on your field. Pay 1 life, choose and use one of the following 2. Put the top 2 cards of your deck into your gauge and draw a card. Put up to 1 item from your deck into your hand and shelf your deck. So just more search power or gauge setup. The gauge setup will come in handy when I go over the 1 impact that we run in the deck as well. But just needing to pay 1 life can also help to reduce our life to 5 if need be, or we could just pay it before we reduce our life to 5 with our Jackknife anyway, since it's going to go to 5 with the Revival Buddy to set up Gold Riter. We're also running the 4 copies of Twin Hearts. You pay 1 life, call a size 2 Armor Dragon from your drop by paying its call cost on top of an Armor Dragon on your field. If this card has Jackknife or Demios Sword Orcus in its card name, that monster gets plus 30,000 power and critical +1. So just being able to give that additional power to our Jackknife Armor Dragon on the field is an added bonus, along with this card being able to just go for the additional power as well, is a strong asset spell to use as well. And the 4 copies of Jackknife History. You choose and use one of the following 2. You put this card into the soul of a card with Jackknife and its card name on your field, and counter, choose a card with Jackknife and its card name, and for that battle, give it +4 power, defense +4, and counter attack. So just more of a counter attack option. Since our Jackknife only has the double attack and soul guard, this spell helps for additional backup to use with it. And also the 3 copies of Jackknife Charge. You put the top 2 cards of your deck into your gauge, then if you have a card with Jackknife and its card name on your field, you put the top card of your deck into your gauge as well. So just a 3 gauge buildup using this card. And the 1 copy of Jackknife Joint. You draw 2 cards. You may only use Jackknife Joint once per turn. If you want to do, mix and match Jackknife Charge with Joint, you can do so. All you have to do is pay a life and discard a monster with Jackknife to get this draw 2. The 3 copies of Dragonic Charge Plus. Once I said before, the additional gauge will come in handy. And also, with this card, you put the top 2 cards of your deck into your gauge. If you have 5 life or less, put the top 3 cards. So this will just give you 5 gauge to build up, which can easily be set, once again, when you have Gold Riter, since Jackknife B will put you at your 5 life. 4 of the new copies of the Green Dragon Shield Revival spell. On top of the draw power and gauge setup it has for cards in your field and life gain, it also has the damage reduction if you need that additional setup before you set up your Gold Riter items. the 2 copies of Dragonic Grimoire. Just more of a hand shuffle to be able to get to some of the proper cards you need. Now, once again, once you have Gold Ritter and Grand Thenses set up on your field, you won't really need much of a defensive wall. So this is just to draw into some of your more important cards, with some of the big finishers being our final impact, and that is Gargantua Punisher Revival Buddy. Having the 8 damage deal that this card can provide, you have your Jackknife Onslaught Assault, and then the final impact being the Revival Buddy version of this card, needing 4 gauge to cast. So this is what with all the gauge build up before and draw power to get to this impact is meant for. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Very, very happy that I was finally able to make the Jackknife Dragon World deck. I've made Orcust, I've made the Star Dragon World Jackknife. I finally wanted to get around to the Dragon World version of this deck as well. So, as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Qualia out.